The Australian Open made a huge mistake with Alexandra Eala as she loses first-round match. Alexandra Eala was among the players to be disappointed early in Melbourne after she lost her opening match at the Australian Open. World number 49 Eala was beaten 6-0, 3-6, 2-6 by American Alicia Parks in the first round of the Australian Open. But perhaps more noteworthy than the match itself was the huge crowds which gathered to watch fan-favorite Eala in action. The first-round clash took place on Court 6 at Melbourne Park, with her followers making huge noise after packing into the venue, while many more watched on the screens around the grounds. The Australian Open should have given Alexandra Eala a bigger court. Of course, planning a Grand Slam schedule is not an easy feat, particularly with the constant variables at play. But Australian Open organizers could have at least anticipated the mega following Eala would be in for, particularly in her first match. In that regard, the WTA Tour rising star should have definitely been playing her opener on a show court at Melbourne Park. Eala has proven more popular than Carlos Alcaraz lately, with her pre-tournament press conference currently at 175,000 views on the Australian Open's YouTube channel. It is a lesson that organizers of the Grand Slam, and indeed the French Open, Wimbledon and the US Open, can undoubtedly learn from going forward. Alexandra Eala has another chance at Australian Open glory. Intriguingly, Eala still has a chance at Australian Open success, and fans have another chance of seeing her in action. The Filipina ace has committed to playing doubles at the tournament, linking up with Brazilian Ingrid Martins. The pair have been drawn to face Magda Linette and Shuko Aoyama in the first round, with the meeting interestingly set to take place on Court 12. Huge crowds can be expected for the match once again, with Eala set to be desperate to right her wrongs from singles. It remains to be seen how that will go, but one certainty is that she is one of the biggest stars in tennis right now, despite only being 20 years old. A first-round silence. How the Australian Open misread Alexandra Eala. The Australian Open prides itself on being the happy slam, a tournament that celebrates sunshine, opportunity, and the promise of new beginnings. Every January, Melbourne becomes a stage where legends defend their legacies and young players test the edges of their courage. Yet sometimes, in the rush to crown champions and sell stories, the tournament stumbles. In the case of Alexandra Eala and her first-round exit, the mistake was not simply about a loss on the scoreboard. It was about how promise was framed, handled, and quietly set aside. Alexandra Eala arrived not as a finished product but as a question mark brimming with potential. She carried the weight that modern tennis places on young talents, the hunger of a new generation, the expectations of a nation still carving its space in the global tennis conversation, and the quiet pressure of being labeled the future before the present has fully arrived. For a player like Eala, a Grand Slam is not just a tournament. It is a classroom, a proving ground, and sometimes a mirror that reflects both strengths and vulnerabilities. The Australian Open's first mistake was mistaking potential for readiness. In today's tennis ecosystem, hype travels faster than development. A junior champion or rising tour player is quickly transformed into a headline, a narrative hook, a social media graphic waiting to be shared. The Open leaned into that impulse. Eala's presence was treated as a moment rather than a process. The spotlight was turned on brightly, but the conditions beneath it were unforgiving. Grand Slam first rounds are ruthless. There is no easing into the tournament, no gentle introduction to the speed and physicality of the highest level. The margins are thin, and the experience gap is wide. By placing Eala directly into this environment without the buffer of time, narrative patience, or realistic expectation, the tournament effectively asked her to perform a miracle instead of play a match. When the miracle did not come, the silence that followed was telling. Another mistake lay in the framing of the loss itself. A first-round defeat for a young player should be contextualized as part of growth. Instead, it often becomes a verdict. The Australian Open, like many major tournaments, has a habit of moving on quickly. Cameras shift. Headlines evaporate. The story becomes not about what was learned, but about who advances next. For Eala, the loss felt less like a chapter and more like a door closing too quickly. There is also the question of environment. The Australian Open is a spectacle. The heat, the the crowds, the noise, the constant presence of expectation. For seasoned professionals, this chaos is familiar territory. For a young player still calibrating her game, it can be overwhelming. If the tournament truly aims to nurture the future of tennis, it must ask whether it is providing stages or simply spotlights. One reveals growth, the other exposes flaws. Eala's match, lost in the opening round, was not a failure of talent. It was a collision between ambition and reality. She showed flashes of the game that has made her name resonate beyond rankings: clean timing, competitive spirit, and the refusal to disappear quietly. But flashes are not enough when the structure around a player demands certainty. The Australian Open, in its hunger for immediate stories, left little room for gradual emergence. The biggest mistake, however, was not logistical or promotional. It was philosophical. Tennis, especially at the Grand Slam level, often forgets that development is nonlinear. Progress is messy. Losses are not detours, they are the road. By treating Eala's early exit as an end rather than a step, the tournament mirrored a broader issue in the sport: the impatience with youth unless it arrives fully formed. In the days following the first round, attention shifted as it always does. New heroes emerged, old champions marched on, and the draw reshaped itself without pause. Eala's name faded from the daily conversation, her match reduced to a statistic. Yet for the player herself, the experience likely lingered. The Australian Open was not just a loss, it was a lesson delivered at full volume. If there is redemption in this story, it lies in what comes next. The Australian Open can learn from moments like these. It can choose to tell better stories, ones that honor development over spectacle. It can protect young players from being consumed by narratives they did not write. And it can remember that the future of tennis is not built on first-round wins alone, but on the resilience forged in first-round losses. Alexandra Eala will move forward, as all serious athletes do. Her career will be defined not by a single match in Melbourne, but by how she absorbs it. The Australian Open, too, must move forward. But if it wishes to remain a true celebration of the sport, it should reflect on how easily it let promise slip into the shadows. Sometimes the biggest mistakes are not the matches that are lost, but the opportunities to nurture growth that are quietly missed.